Hey everybody, it's Savage Lens News coming in this week with a meta breakdown. I took all of the numbers, compiled them, put everything together in nice pretty charts for you so you don't have to worry about it or waste your time really going through those tiny little pie charts with no numbers and no names. I'm personally colorblind, so every time LSS puts out one of those pie charts with 3 different colors of red and 4 different colors of blue, I never really understand what's going on. So I made some of those again for you guys, a little easier to understand, and then I deep dove some of the numbers that they were a little bit less generous with giving us. So let's jump in there. But for those of you who don't care about the data, winter has come, right? You want the TLDR, play an ice deck. That's kind of it. But let's get into it, right? All right, everybody, let's dive into the data real quick. So I went ahead and broke down these all of the Proquest data. I did some clever deductions on how many of each deck was there and based on some of the numbers LSS put out. But we can dive into it and take a look. So your total meta breakdown across every Proquest this last weekend, you're going to see that it's really, really diverse, very diverse. Unlike the Starvo meta, the Chain meta, it seems that this first week, we weren't really collectively decided on what the best deck was. We're kind of leaning that direction. The top 4 or 5 heroes really do make up a vast majority of the meta, 50-ish%. You got Fi, Icelander, Dash, Dromai, Oldhim, and Bravo are all kind of taking up very large percent of the overall meta. Fi being the most popular by a large margin. But I think we all knew that. Fi is a very popular deck. Icelander, and very good. Dash is the disruptor who came out of this last set with the most cards. The only real shocking one to me is I would say Dromai has a much higher percent of the meta than I really thought she would. And then, you kind of split between the two. If you add the two Guardians together, they actually make up a very large percent. They would be second place if you merge them together. So another interesting thing I wanted to look at here is Talishar data a good indicator of competitive seasons? And so it actually looks like it kind of is, right? So taking all of the Talishar games and comparing them to the percent of the meta for ProQuest season, you'll see that it correlates pretty strong, right? There's a couple weird decks in there that seem to be way more popular on Talishar than they are in the true meta, like Rhinar and Bravo seem to be quite a bit more popular. Kano also is quite a bit more popular on Talishar than it is in real life, but you're going to see that Fi seems to be a pretty big safety pick, right? Much larger percent of tournament meta than online play. And I think that's just because he's a good, effective, easy to play, and very strong right now. And then you're going to see the low tier decks, right? A lot of people don't want to take those into a professional or tournament level setting. So they do have quite a bit more representation online than they do in person. But other than that, follows pretty directly, right? Which is very interesting. Very interesting. We should keep looking at this in the future. And then when we go ahead and add in top 8 percentage, right? It still kind of tracks. We do see a little bit of a divergence where these really, really good decks like Fi, Icelander start to pull ahead. Oldhim definitely pulls ahead. And then the low tiers obviously drop off significantly when we pull in their top 8 percentage, but it's still trending. So, in the future, Talishar does seem to be a pretty decent place to look for meta indications. Is it the gospel? Absolutely not. But it is very directionally accurate, which is interesting. So if we dive down a little bit deeper, of the decks that entered the ProQuest, how many of them hit top 8? And what is their percentage? And this is where it starts getting way more directional, in my opinion, right? We have 4 decks who make up nearly 50% of the top 8. That's Fi, Icelander, Oldhim, and Dromai. Dromai being another surprise to me, but it is what it is, right? One notable, interesting kind of occurrence is Dash fell way off, right? So as one of the more represented decks in general, her top 8 conversion is pretty low. Interesting, right? And the other big disruptor here is Oldhim, right? Oldhim goes from one of the lower represented decks, 7-ish%, straight to 3rd place on top 8 percentage. So Oldhim is converting, and this is going to be a trend that continues, right? So here, kind of mostly what we expected, I think, but a couple of disruptors are starting to appear. And then if we break this down even further into the finalist, right? Two heroes make up nearly 50% of the finalist percentages, and that would be Oldhim and Icelander. Oldhim with 23% of all wins this ProQuest season, and you add the two Battle Hardens that Oldhim won on. Looks like Oldhim is a clear winner in this meta, with Icelander following very shortly behind. You know, Icelander is a huge amount of the top 8s, with huge amount of the top 8 Battle Hardens, so it seems like the two ice decks are really just pulling ahead of the rest of the competition. Fi would be your third place bet. It seems to be the only aggro deck that is holding on to a majority share, and it seems to be one of the few decks that can deal with the ice decks effectively, probably because of something like Belittle and Minnowism, and just its insane ability to burst out and its consistent damage with, you know, Phoenix Flame, right? So, looking at this again, kind of dissecting the data a little bit differently, right? So the best converting decks here are Oldhim, Bolton, surprisingly, Icelander, Dory, Briar, right? So if we look at this, your solid choices in the meta based on all of the numbers we've seen so far really are Oldhim, Icelander, Fi, and Dash, right? I would say Briar kind of fits into that box as well, but some very surprising conversions are the Warriors, right? Bolton and Dory both have extremely high conversion rates based on the number of Dories and Boltons that entered versus the amount of top 8s and wins. Warrior seems to be in a pretty good place. And those people who pilot Warriors really well are converting, right? Behind them are the two Runeblades, right? I think diehard Runeblade players are always going to get those wins. Maybe it's because some of these tournaments are smaller. The RNG of Viserai isn't hurting them as bad. They can make it through the 5-6 games to claim that top 8. But very interesting to see. And then you're going to have a couple decks at the bottom, Assassin, Azalea, and Levia not converting at all. So, not so good. And then here we really break down your chance to win top 8, your chance to win and your chance to hit top 8 here. And it's pretty clear, right? Oldhim absolutely dominating, right? Has the highest chance to win of all decks, the highest chance to top 8 of all decks. And then it follows pretty linearly down with the Icelander, Dory, Fi, Briar, Dash, right? But what's really weird, you look at that top section right here. The two Warriors, right? Dory and Bolton, incredibly high conversion rates. Incredibly high. It's crazy, right? And then you're going to see Briar, Dash, Dromai, Bravo, Rhinar kind of going down all the way to the bottom, right? So maybe there's something to be explored with these Warrior decks, right? They do prey on Fi. I know that much, but how are they getting through these ice decks? I am not positive. Maybe it's the new sword, right? We're really going to have to look into this in the future and see if this is a trend that continues over the next couple of weeks. Okay, everybody. So let's take a look at how wrong I was. So last session, my guess is based on, what I was seeing online and in-person play was that Icelander, Dash, Fi, and Briar were our kind of meta-defining decks. I had guessed that Oldhim was going to fall off, mostly because of Dash, and Icelander, like really kind of being most represented, and we're really going to hurt the Oldhim performance. And then the rest of it, Warrior, Kano, Rhinar, Dromai, I put as great picks and good level down there, and then the skip at the bottom. So obviously I was wrong immediately in one place. That's Oldhim. It seems Oldhim has just adapted. The deck lists, if you go look at them, the ones that have been posted from the Battle Hardened, a lot of the ones that we've seen from the Proquest list, doesn't look like the Oldhims we've seen before. It has a direct counter to Dash. It has a direct counter, they're teching cards like Warhorn. They're teching cards like Smashing Good Time. They've gone super tall. They're going way more aggressive. And we've kind of known for a while that Icelander falls to tall decks. And now when you're sending a Glacial Footsteps for 13 at a Dash to break their items, it is very hard for them to deal with, right? So Oldhim is going up. Icelander holds in the same spot that I think, I predicted her at, and I think Dash falls down, right? Dash might even fall down enough to go here. So I think we have our pyramid forming, right, everybody? I think Fi, Icelander, and Oldhim are the pillars of the format right now. So weirdly enough, I did guess Dory correctly. I think with Fi being a vast majority of the meta, and Icelanders, I have heard a couple Icelanders complain about the Dory matchup. She seems to be a decent spear into Fi and Icelander. And if you can figure out Oldhim, it's a great pick. I was pretty wrong with Kano, I'm going to say, and I think Reinar has fallen down based on the results so far. So if I were to re-guess the meta, I would say Oldhim, Icelander, Fi at the top. I would probably put Dash, Briar, and Dory as major threats. Dromai and Bravo kind of following right after. And then I think based on results, we're looking at something like this. Arachne goes down. I don't actually really know what to do with Bolton here. Based on conversion rate, I mean, the sample is so low. Based on conversion rate, he's doing something right. So, I'm afraid to put him in great pick, but clearly there's something going on with Warriors right now, and that, maybe he deserves to be this high. I'm really not sure. And underperforming decks, unfortunately, we're looking at Kano probably at the bottom next to Lexi. Reinar sitting somewhere here. He does seem to be converting, but just not winning anything. So probably looks something like this. Now, I do find it very strange that Reinar is sitting that low because he has a good matchup into Oldhim and a decent matchup into Icelander, but we'll see in the future if this shakes out. I'm also surprised at Lexi's performance. I think she should be performing better, right? I just think that deck should have better matchups into Icelander and Fi, right? Maybe Oldhim is the reason Lexi's not performing right now. But it's a very interesting meta. So the real hard part about this triangle, and I think one of the reasons these mid-range decks are going to struggle for a while, is you have to be able to sift through the first couple rounds of a Proquest, which is almost entirely made up of aggro decks, right? From a percentage perspective, Fi, Rune Blades, they make up an enormous amount of the players around you when you first start a Proquest. So if you wanted to target Oldhim and Icelander, a lot of the decks that beat those two don't do so well into aggro decks, right? So I think what's going to end up happening is Fi is going to delete a lot of the decks from existence based on how fast it is that can deal with these top two meta picks. So either, you figure out a way to deal with Fi and then deal with the ice decks at the top, or you kind of are forced to gem your way through, just dodge the aggro decks and hopefully eat the ice decks until you can settle near the top to take them on in the last couple rounds. That's going to be a hard task, right? Heroes who possibly stand out to me are Bravo, Dromai, the Warriors, and Briar, right? I think they have a decent chance at beating Fi and the ice decks. I'm surprised Reinar and Lexi are performing as bad as they are, as I think that they could both do the same thing, get lucky through the aggro decks, or inverse of each other. Reinar gets lucky through aggro, Lexi eats aggro, and then they just have to dodge, their one bad matchup near the top. But it's very interesting. Okay, before I sign off, I just wanted to go over the numbers. You can skip this part, not really important. But how I reached the conclusions that I reached, right? So I went ahead and grabbed the Talishar numbers. I put them in there, the player count and the percent of how many players play those heroes out of everything. Estimated number of heroes in the Proquest meta. They never gave us this number directly. So this is a very big guess, right? They said around 4,000 players. So I took the percent of heroes and just, derived it from 4,000. Clearly that is not 100% accurate, but it did line up pretty correctly on the right-hand side here, right? So pretty close. I would say these numbers are very close-ish close, not that important. I'm going for directional, not absolute. I took the numbers they gave us, percent of meta, percent of top 8 numbers, winning numbers, added them in here, right? And then the top 8 conversion, very clearly easy to get that number. And then I kind of derived this little chance to win calculation based on the number of heroes and their performance throughout the Proquest season 1 or week 1, right? So just as a quick explanation, in case you guys were curious, Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Good luck on your ProQuest games this weekend. See you around.